All right, so let's start with the big story that we're tracking on WION at this hour, where after months of heightened tensions and also some very serious concerns that Russia at this point of time could potentially be planning to invade into Ukraine, the American President Joe Biden is now all set to talk to his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in what is shaping up to be a very high-stakes video call between the two world leaders. It could also potentially decide the course of Ukraine's near future. The White House aides remain very skeptical that diplomacy could potentially stop President Putin from potentially making his moves into Ukraine. Now, Biden is expected to encourage for a diplomatic de-escalation over the troop build-up that has now taken place along the border with Ukraine by Russia. The U.S. officials have said that the United States, along with NATO allies, are mulling on a whole host of different measures to try and deter a possible Russian invasion, which could be imminent as happening in January. Now, the question, of course, that the Western nations have to consider at this point of time is, does Putin want to invade into Ukraine as he did in 2014, where Russia had annexed Crimea? Western allies are now trying to cut Russia off from international financial systems and also impose direct sanctions on Putin's closest associates in the event of Putin pressing forth with some kind of a ground invasion of Ukraine.
I think that it's not about threats. It's about conveying that the right path forward here is through diplomacy. In the meantime, on financial sanctions, we've consulted significantly with our allies and believe we have a path forward that would impose significant and severe harm on the Russian economy. You can call that a threat, you can call that a fact, you can call that preparation, whatever you want to call it.
Now, the White House, remember, has already warned that the United States is ready to boost its military presence in Eastern Europe if Moscow were to escalate its military activities along the border with Ukraine. Meanwhile, the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, Britain and the United States have all expressed their determination that Ukraine's sovereignty should be respected. And they've also committed to act to maintain peace in Eastern Europe. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken also spoke to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky ahead of this crucial call between the American and the Russian presidents.
We've also been clear, and we've heard from our allies, our NATO allies including, that we believe there is an opportunity, a window before us to resolve this diplomatically, chiefly through full implementation of the Minsk agreements. Specifically, should Russia follow this path of confrontation and military action, we have made clear to Moscow that we will respond resolutely, including with a range of what we have called high-impact economic measures that we've refrained from using in the past. And it's that last clause.
A declassified assessment disclosed by the Biden administration last week suggested that Russia may have potentially as many as 175,000 troops on the border by January. Presently, Russia is said to have as many as about 100,000 troops amassed along the border with Ukraine. And U.S. intelligence officials fear that Putin could also try for a three-sided pincer invasion of Ukraine. And we also earlier spoke with our correspondent Stuart Smith, who joined us from Moscow to tell us what Russia's expectations are as Vladimir Putin heads into this high-stakes talks with the American President Joe Biden. Listen to what Stuart Smith had to say.
Yes, well, President Biden and his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, have made it quite clear the demands they would like from Russia. They're saying that it's up to Russia to remove its numerous troops, according to Ukraine, nearly 100,000 troops at the Russian border, away from the border as the first step to de-escalation. But Russia has insisted from the outset that it's free to move troops within its border as it sees fit, and even denies any sort of escalation near the border. Now, the Kremlin's repeatedly said that its worry is with Ukraine. For example, Ukraine Ukraine taking action in the eastern Donbass region, which is contested, and it's worried Ukraine, with the United States military support in terms of arms and ammunition and political support, may choose to take that itself. So Moscow not only is worried about Ukraine and what Ukraine might do, but has a bigger concern here about NATO enlargement. That's the phrase we keep hearing from the Kremlin, NATO enlargement. This is the idea that NATO, the military alliance led by the United States in practice, but formally all players equal, it's worried about NATO getting close to Russia's borders and with that threatening Russia. Now, right now, Ukraine is not part of that alliance. One of Russia's red lines, one of the things President Putin is likely to request, is that it's in writing, in black and white, that Ukraine cannot join NATO. As things stand, it has an invitation, but it's not ready to enter the agreement right now. The other thing President Putin is very concerned about is that NATO will deploy its forces in Ukraine, even without Ukraine being a NATO member. And that's another thing President Putin is likely to push on. Neither of these things, as we saw last week when the respective foreign ministers of Russia and the United States met, neither of these things are easy to square. They're very contradictory, and both sides see this whole issue of Ukraine and NATO from a very different perspective.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.